with heating cost once birds have been placed, that means we probably did not do a good job of preparing that litter bed prior to bird arrival. And so we need to go kind of backwards in the time frame and think about how do we get that litter prepared properly to before the birds show up.
Welcome to the Poultry Podcast Show, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Doug Corver, dedicated to bringing you the latest insights and discussions in the poultry industry. Get ready to expand your knowledge and stay ahead with today's episode. If you find this interview interesting, please let us know by visiting our website at wisenetics.com. Our guest today is Dr. Craig Coufal. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Pretty close. Good enough.
Who is the Research and Technical Services Manager at Jones Hamilton Company. Craig started his career as production supervisor at Cal-Maine Foods. He then returned to university, earning his MSc and PhD degrees at Texas A&M University. He was an assistant extension professor at Mississippi State University, and in 2008, he returned to Texas A&M as an assistant and then associate professor and extension specialist. Since 2022, he's been the Senior Research and Technical Services Manager at Jones Hamilton Company. Welcome to the Poultry Podcast Show, Craig.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be with you.
So can you tell us a little bit about your own background and your path to where you are now? What made you interested in poultry as a career?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, I started out with poultry as a youth. Here in Texas, where I grew up, we have a really large program where the youth in FFA or 4-H programs can rear broiler or turkeys and exhibit those at the local and statewide livestock shows as a competition. So basically, the biggest turkey or the biggest chicken, is the winner. So it's all about management. It's all about nutrition, making those birds grow to the best of their ability. And so that's how I started out as a youth with poultry. I was also involved with poultry judging in FFA in high school, and just really enjoyed working with poultry and eggs, and just found that to be a very interesting career opportunity. And so that's kind of how I got started. So
while you were at Texas A&M as a student and then as a faculty member, what was your focus? What area did you work in? So I worked in many different areas related to poultry management. Did a lot of work, obviously, with litter management. That was kind of my PhD work. I did a lot of work also with eggs from both a production standpoint, but also a egg sanitation standpoint. So how do we properly sanitize both hatching and table eggs to ensure we decontaminate any pathogens from those eggs. Did some work in nutrition, did quite a bit of work in environmental management. So how do we minimize the environmental impact of poultry production, both from a environmental impact, meaning, how much dust or ammonia emissions, land application of manure, to even looking at how to reduce, the environmental footprint of poultry. So a lot of different aspects related to management of poultry to produce meat and eggs.
Jones Hamilton has become the poultry industry's animal health authority by combining research-driven products with expert support. Focused on science, safety, and sustainability, we empower producers to maintain healthier house environments. JH started with PLT litter amendment for pH and ammonia control, expanded with PWT for water acidification, and now supports organic operations with Diamate. The proof of our success can be found in bird performance, all backed by our 30 years of research. Learn more at joneshamiltonag.com.
Let's talk a little bit about your current interests in litter management. So what's your biggest challenge, particularly in proper litter management in winter?
I guess, start that answer with just saying, most of my answers revolve around the concept of managing litter that's been recycled over, many flocks, in some areas of the world and in some countries, they still do complete cleanouts after after every flock. But here in the United States and in many countries, even like in uh, Central and South America, the mode of action or the mode of standard procedure for litter management is to recycle that litter for many flocks just because of cost and necessity. And so the biggest challenge that I've seen in my travels and in my working with folks is really managing the moisture. It all comes down to moisture. Typically at the end of a flock, once those birds have been in there for anywhere from 35 to maybe 60 days, you know, you see a lot of moisture buildup, especially under the drinker lines, maybe along the walls if we've had some condensation issues, particularly in winter, right? When we're bringing in colder air, we've seen us get some condensation where that cold air may hit the warm litter and we get some buildup of moisture. Um, and so moisture management is really, from in all that I've evaluated over the last few years, is the biggest challenge. If we can figure out on our farms, and that varies, right, from farm to farm and region to region. If we can get the moisture of that litter to be correct, that's putting us way ahead of the game. And so, and moisture obviously is tied to so many challenges in bird health. The higher the moisture, the higher the ammonia production, the higher the bacterial potential load growing in that litter. And of course, high moisture litter is also very detrimental to the uh, quality of the bird's feet. If they stand on wet litter all day long, you're going to tend to see poor paw quality. You see those foot lesions occurring. And so, it really all just goes back to moisture management.
So the producer walks into their barn and they want to know, am I doing a good job of managing the litter moisture? What are some ways that they can assess that, both on a day-to-day basis and also, by the end of the flock and preparing for the next one?
During the flock, it's obviously a more of a visual evaluation. Do we see caking, right? Typically, litter is going to start to clump up. We call that caking or crusting, depending on, what region of the world you're in as to what, terminology you may use. But caking or crusting, that's the first thing to look for is, are we getting that litter so wet that it's starting to clump or aggregate into more of a wet, compact type material. So visual appearance, is it dry? Is it not caking? And of course, air quality, both in terms of ammonia and in terms of humidity. If we're doing a good job of both ventilating and managing the litter, then we should have humidity under control. We don't want it to be so dry, that we get maybe below 30 or 40% humidity. But in most situations, particularly in the wintertime when people are cutting back on ventilation, that humidity is going to start to creep up. It's going to maybe 60, 70, 80% humidity in the barn. And humidity is a big stressor to birds. And so, I would say when you walk into the barn, the first things you want to evaluate is your litter dryness based on caking, and then what is your humidity? How does it just feel? Does it feel like it's a nice, pleasant, cool autumn day in there, or is it, summertime, stagnant, humid, sauna type kind of situation, And so, if it feels unpleasant to you, it probably feels unpleasant to the birds as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned in winter ventilation rates go down. Of course, it costs money to heat that air that you're bringing into the barn. So how do producers make a decision on how to balance that ventilation with the need to minimize heat loss?
Yeah, and so obviously, the simple answer is you want to ventilate to control humidity, right? That's what we all know that our barns are designed is really to manage that water content. We want to make sure we're managing that humidity. How do we balance that? It really all goes back to setting up that barn, setting up that litter quality prior to the bird placement. If we have the litter dry, if we have properly conditioned that litter to remove moisture and ammonia prior to chick placement, that's going to make managing that humidity, managing that ventilation, and conserving that heat after chick placement much easier. If we're struggling to manage ventilation and moisture management and balance that with heating cost once birds have been placed, that means we probably did not do a good job of preparing that litter bed prior to bird arrival. And so we need to go kind of backwards in the time frame and think about how do we get that litter prepared properly to before the birds show up.
So looking around the world where in a lot of places there's still open-sided houses or curtain-sided houses, are there different challenges when dealing with open-sided houses versus tunnel ventilated and cooling pad equipped houses?
Yeah, it just depends on how you manage them and your different environments. With the advantages, obviously, of our tunnel ventilated houses that we can get a lot of air moving over that litter at a high speed. You can never discount the importance of wind speed across the litter surface to help dry that litter out. That's very important. And it really the solid sidewall houses also really help us to manage how that air comes into the house, right? We want to make sure that all air entering the house is coming through the inlets as it's properly designed. And because that way the cold air coming in can mix properly with the warm air so that we don't end up with condensation on the floors. Some of the challenges with more of our open-sided houses in cooler weather, our curtain-sided houses in cooling weather would be, if we have cracks, if we have leaks, if we have holes in those curtains, then we don't get proper air mixing. We don't get the air coming in a way that the building is really designed to manage. And it gets a little, and of course, if we're only ventilating by, say, cracking the curtain for a few inches to allow heat to escape or fresh air to come in, then we don't get that rapid air movement across that litter surface to help with drying as well. So really, yeah, I would say those are the biggest differences between the old curtain-sided versus our solid sidewall houses. Is just managing airflow patterns to help dry that litter, keep that litter dry.
AB Vista, an innovative animal nutrition company offering intelligent solutions for the poultry industry. The combination of innovative products, technical expertise, and cutting-edge services provide the ideal tools to drive poultry production. To learn more about AB Vista tools, check abvista.com.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Poultry Podcast Show presented by Wisenetics, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. You can also set the notifications to on from our channel so you don't miss any other upcoming episodes. As always, please feel free to leave us your comments at any time. Your feedback is invaluable to us. Craig, you talked a little bit about some of the negative outcomes of poor litter management. So how do those issues impact bird health and performance? You mentioned some of them, but maybe we can get it a little more detailed.
Sure. So obviously, one of the biggest challenges, that we've dealt with since probably the beginning of the poultry industry is ammonia management. Ammonia is going to be very detrimental to the respiratory system of the bird, causes damage to the cilia of the trachea of the bird. Those cilia are what help filter dust particles and airborne bacteria and stuff out of the air that the bird is breathing. And so if we have ammonia damage to basically that, if you want to consider it that filtration system of the bird's respiratory system, that's when we can see, some challenges to their respiratory system as far as air cyclitis or other types of challenges. The other, of course, would be bacteria. When we have high bacteria loads in the litter, E. coli, Clostridium, related to gangrenous dermatitis. High E. coli loads are often associated with things like air cyclitis or secondary bacterial infections. when the birds may be experiencing a viral challenge, such as bronchitis or metapneumovirus or those kind of things. So basically, when you have these poor litter conditions, you have basically extra stressors, if you will, to the bird's immune system, right? You're challenging that bird in multiple ways, whether it's through respiratory damage, bacterial load, stress to their paws as far as poor paw quality. And so really it's all about, reducing the stress to that bird, so that if they do experience any kind of a disease or immuno challenge, they can fight it off, right? And so, when a bird has compounding stressors, that's when they start to lose the ability to deal with all those stressors or disease challenges. And that's when you start to see, bird performance issues, and under severe conditions, maybe even losses in with mortality. But definitely challenges and losses to performance as far as weight gain, feed conversion, paw quality, those kinds of parameters that impact, our economic outcomes.
A little bit earlier, you talked about the importance of getting that litter quality right before the chicks are placed. So, what are some of the steps that producers can take to manage that properly in between cycles?
Great question. Yeah, so I would say number one on the list is to use the proper litter management technique, right? When we have a flock of birds that goes out, we'll typically see at least some minimal caking in the house, usually under the drinker lines. It's almost impossible to never have any kind of caking in the house. So we have to deal with that caked up litter, that wettest litter properly. The good old fashioned standard that most people, at least in the U.S., have used is to decake, to use either a decake machine or a skid loader with a bucket or something to remove that wettest material. Obviously, other things like litter winnowing or pulverizing or tilling are popular methods as well. So it's important to choose the appropriate technique based on many factors. So the amount of caking, the amount of downtime we have to work with, weather conditions. If it's cold and rainy outside, it's going to be very difficult to remove that moisture with ventilation alone. We may need to make sure we decake that litter to take that wettest litter out. So choose the appropriate litter method is number one. Number two, and one thing that I really try to always talk to people about is try to keep that house, that poultry barn, as warm as possible during that downtime. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to turn heaters on, which that would be great, but I understand that costs money. But keeping the indoors closed, keeping our vent doors properly managed, to try to keep the heat in the barn, the natural heat that is present. That's important because the evaporation of water from the litter requires heat. If we let the litter get cold, we're going to conserve that moisture inside that litter. The volatilization, the loss of ammonia from the litter is also higher at higher temperatures. So the warmer we can keep the barn, the warmer we can keep that litter bed, the more moisture, the more ammonia that will be purged from that litter during that downtime. And of course, that means we also have to marry that with ventilation, right? We have to use our ventilation if we're talking about a solid sidewall barn, we have to ventilate that moisture, ventilate that ammonia out of the barn during that downtime. So, proper methodology, keeping the barn as warm as possible. And then, of course, before chick placement, very, very important to preheat that litter. We don't want to wait too long to actually turn the heaters on, because, again, not only do we want to get that litter bed as warm as possible for chick comfort, but we also want to drive off as much moisture and as much ammonia out of that litter prior to chick placement as we can. So, those are some really critical things that need to be done in that downtime to properly prepare that litter bed to get ready for chick placement.
So, in your opinion, are there litter additives that can or should be used, or fresh litter? How much fresh litter, or is that necessary? Can you comment on that?
So typically, I don't recommend a lot of additives per se between flocks. I've never found any product that actually really does a whole lot, if you will, to that in that scenario. Obviously, we use our litter amendments to combat ammonia just prior to chick placement. But typically, I don't recommend a lot of different additives or a lot of different products during that downtime. If The one thing that you can do, and it gets back to one thing I like to talk about is litter particle size. And you mentioned adding fresh litter, and that is one thing that can be done to help with litter particle size. Is to once in a while come in there and add some fresh litter, maybe a little dusting of some fresh shavings or sawdust. And really what that does is it gives us some dry material to work with, but two, it also changes the litter particle size. One of the things people kind of tend to forget about when they think about litter is that not only does the litter have to absorb moisture from the birds as they're excreting manure during the grow out, but it has to release that moisture as well to be ventilated out. If we have very, very fine particle size litter, which typically happens after we've used it for 4, 5, 6, 20 flocks, whatever the case may be, we're gonna basically have almost essentially dust, and so coming in there and adding some fresh litter on an occasion just to top dress it, which basically just creates some variation in particle size, creates what we call porosity. It creates pore space or air space in that litter material, which allows for that better drying. And so that's one thing that I would recommend, maybe periodically every third, fourth, fifth flock, maybe as we go along. Depending on other management considerations, top dressing can be a very effective tool to help give us some different particle size in that litter without having to do a complete clean out and complete litter change out, which can be very expensive.
So you talked about the importance of ventilation and moisture management, but are there other things that producers can do to mitigate some of those challenges that you talked about with litter quality?
Yeah, so I think as I mentioned, keeping the litter warm, preheating is very important. If we can, I understand, gas can be expensive, right? If we're going to preheat, we're going to turn the heaters on, we're going to burn a lot of fuel to heat that up. But the longer we can preheat, the longer that we can get that litter warm, say 48 to 72 hours prior to chick placement, the drier that litter is going to be, the more ammonia that we can purge out prior to chick placement, the less ventilation, the less gas we will actually have to use once chicks are placed. So there is an advantage. Plus, doing that is going to give us a proper litter condition. It's going to give us proper litter bed. And then it's going to allow the litter amendments that we use to control ammonia to last longer. So the longer we can get those products to control ammonia into the brood period, the less fuel, the less ventilation required after chicks are placed. So I always try to encourage folks, don't just focus on how much fuel you're burning before chicks show up, but think about how much fuel you're going to burn after chicks show up. And I think if we use a little bit of that fuel on the front side to preheat that litter and really properly prepare that litter bed, it's actually going to save us more on the back end once birds show up. And of course, that's going to help bird performance, which is going to give us a better return once we sell the flock.
Exactly.
It's time for our famous 3.
Join the Poultry Science Association at our inaugural PSA Pacific Rim Scientific Conference, October 13th through 16th in Macau, China, to explore groundbreaking symposia and hear the latest research impacting the global poultry industry. Here is your chance to present your latest work, recruit future leaders, and network with other experts in the field. Help us shape the future of poultry science. Register now at poultryscience.org. See you in Macau.
Well, Craig, thanks a lot for your insight on litter management. I learned a lot, and I think our listeners did too. But before we let you go, we've got some closing questions for you. First of all, do you have a favorite poultry or agriculture-related book or resource that you rely on?
I'm not a nutritionist by training or what I do in my job necessarily, but I've always found that the book Nutrition of the Chicken is a very interesting book to me. I guess because I'm a scientist and I enjoy reading the biochemistry, if you will, of nutrition. I've always just enjoyed reading different chapters of Nutrition of the Chicken.
Great. How about outside of agriculture? Do you have a go-to book or resource that you like?
I probably couldn't give you one. If there was one, I don't know if I have a title, but it would be probably related to human nutrition and diet. Trying to books on eating healthy.
Okay, great. And then the last question, in your opinion, in your experience, what do you think is the most important characteristic for a person to have in order to be successful in the poultry industry?
I would say the most important characteristic would be to never stop learning. No matter, how much you study and how much you read, there's always something new around the corner. And so I try to always keep a very open mind to learning new things. I think, someone said it one time, it might have been my grandmother, I don't remember, but she said, if you stop learning, you're done. So you're just done, right? And so you're just done with your career, you're done with life. So, just always keep an open mind to learning something new, because there's always something new out there to learn every day.
Yeah, that's great advice. Dr. Craig Coufal, thanks so much for joining us today on the Poultry Podcast Show.
My pleasure. Enjoyed it.
That concludes another episode of the Poultry Podcast Show presented by Wisenetics. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us. You can visit our website at wisenetics.com and learn more about all of our podcast segments for poultry, swine, dairy, beef, feed mill crops, and even pet food. I'm Doug Corver, and I'll see you next time on the Poultry Podcast Show.